Have you ever done an interview where you haven't gotten a pipeline question?
I'm trying very hard to steer people away from asking that first inevitable question, but
right.
Please.
Yeah, now I'm caught. Well, the FS, the financial secretary, earlier said, well, two things. One is 400 plus companies have filed.
Yes.
That's accurate?
Accurate.
Okay. And that this year will, of course, be better than last year. Mm-hmm. I assume that's also accurate. Accurate in, what sense?
Well, let's talk about the pipeline. And instead of just focusing on numbers, let's put things in context. So last year, I think by now it's a well-recited fact, we completed IPOs for 119 issuers and raising a total of $37.5 billion. So we are now in early June. We have already completed 66 IPOs, and the fundraise through IPOs to date is approximately 21 billion. So I think we're on good track. But like I said, let's focus not just on the numbers. I think what is very interesting to me with this pipeline, it's the composition, okay? And let me call out maybe a few themes. So broadly speaking, I see 4 emerging themes. First of all, it's definitely tech, okay? It remains, I would say, a very good portion of the pipeline. But within even the tech space, it's quite diverse. So obviously, we have our flagship Chapter 18A, which is pre-revenue biotechnology company. That's still showing very strongly in the pipeline. We also have 18C, which is specialist technology, and that will cover AI. But I think even within the AI bucket, it's really the full value chain. So from chips to compute to large language models to applications to even, if you extend it further out, people talk about, energy, right? Which is very, very
That's important. That's a bottleneck too.
Yeah. And so, you really see a proliferation of all these issuers in all the different segments within the AI bucket broadly. That's theme number 1. Theme number 2, I'm seeing a return of mineral companies in my pipeline. And that's very interesting. I think it's, broadly speaking, the mineral space is getting back into the right cycle. I think that has a lot to do with just how investors are diversifying. We saw the movements in metal prices last year, for example, right? From gold to silver to copper to anything which, goes into EV batteries, for example.
Real world assets.
Yeah, so I'm seeing a pretty strong return of mining companies in the pipeline. The third one is A&H. That continues to be a trend. And I'm talking about companies which are listed on the Chinese mainland exchange coming to Hong Kong for another listing. And a lot of these issuers are really doing that because they want an offshore fundraising platform to support their internationalization journey. And I think that is now a tried and tested route, which has become very popular. The fourth theme is something I really like to share. So people always say, hey, Bonnie, your exchange is too concentrated on Chinese businesses. Well, I know that we have historically been a very popular platform for Chinese-based companies to list. But when I did a double click on the 120 companies which listed on my exchange last year, what I found is very interesting. About half of them actually have revenue, more than half of their revenue generated from outside of China. So they are, in fact, already very international. I call them China MNCs these days. I also now begin to meet a lot of companies which are what I call born global. So on the face, you'll call them Chinese company, but if you really look into it, it's very international. And that's a new breed coming out, which I'm very excited about.
Talk to us about, that's a good paradigm shift, looking at the going abroad theme, going global theme of Chinese companies, China multinationals. You buy the S&P 500, you're not just buying U.S. companies, right? These are companies that do business around the world. How much more momentum do you see? And I imagine, is that in the A&H segment that you see
not
that?
Just.
Not just? But how much momentum do you see that as a pillar this year?
I think it's going to continue on a growing track. It's inevitable in a way, right? So let me maybe, okay, everyone talks about the SpaceX IPO.
Right.
For example.
I didn't bring it up, but okay.
Oh, yeah, I'll bring it up. So it's obviously a very exciting and interesting deal, but
yes.
A lot of people are also now looking into the supply chain behind SpaceX.
Sure.
And if you really peel the onion and look into it, I'm quite sure that you'll start seeing a lot of companies which may be what you generally looked at as Chinese companies. So what I'm trying to say is actually the global economy is still very interwoven, and the Chinese supply chain really have a very broad coverage, and therefore to your question, it's not confined to an A&H company. Like I said, you now will be able to pick up a lot of born global companies, which from the day they are established, is already quite global.
So safe to say we'll top last year's number, whether that's volume or actual money raised?
Oh,
Is that safe to assume, direction of travel-wise?
Yeah, well, let me say this.
Yeah, I'm asking
usually, the second half is always sort of more active than the first half of the year. So I gave the number for the first half already. I keep my fingers crossed.
It doesn't seem like momentum has changed from last year. But on the surface, we showed you some headlines earlier, there have been some changes, whether or not it's this focus from quantity to quality. In what ways have things changed?
Okay, a lot of ways. But one thing that I find very gratifying is when I go abroad, and I just got back from Central Asia, I found that my engagement with both issuers and I think more importantly with investors, a lot more interesting. I feel that global investors have now really turned their focus back to this part of the world. And 2 years ago, I probably will still be trying my very best to debate whether, or persuade global investors about the investability of China. Now, I think the assumption is it's very investable, but how should we do it and when should we do it? So I found that the conversation to be a lot more informed, more interesting. That to me is a very big and positive change.
How do we need to interpret the recent news of tighter oversight into cross-border investments?
Okay, so you're probably referring to the announcement made end of May, 22nd. Now, we took note of that, and basically it's targeting illegal cross-border investment. But the announcement also made a point to emphasize that the legal official channels are fine, right? Such as the Stock Connect, which obviously have been in place since 2014. And so, to me, Hong Kong as a market, obviously we want good, strong activity, but we also want to put an emphasis on compliant behavior and activities, right? So to me, I feel that it will probably, it's always good to tackle non-compliant behavior, but the fact that we can offer investors with a compliant and very efficient channel for them to do these cross-border investment, I think is probably going to position us very well.
Okay, so no issue that you foresee in the liquidity front being able to...
Let me give you the numbers. I always like to speak with facts. So since the end of May, if you look at volumes, let's focus on, southbound, northbound. I mean, everything has stayed pretty much, the same. In fact, May has been a particularly strong month for us. Last year, for example, southbound ADT for the year is at 121 billion Hong Kong dollars. It's improved about 14% year to date. Northbound has been very, very strong. So northbound last year was about 212 billion RMB. This is ADT. And now it's edging closer to 380, on some occasional days touching 400, right? And what that is telling me is, while I know, right, a lot of people is under the impression that, oh, the Hong Kong market has done well because you have all these southbound flow. Yes, factually correct, but I put more attention on the fact that the rest of the world seems to be more interested to trade in Hong Kong, first of all, but also through Hong Kong into the Asia.
Into China, the northbound connect.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the product. You guys are getting into the index business.
Yes.
Okay, so what does that mean and how are you doing it? And how does that show up in our world?
Okay, so yes, we launched our HKEX Tech 100 Index in December last year. And why are we doing it? First of all, I think we always want to venture into what we call adjacent business, which plays to the advantage of our strong core businesses. And we know investors, a lot of them needs benchmarks, to track.
But there's so many benchmarks already.
Yeah, okay, so why do we start with Tech 100, right? If we look at what is available today, we saw sort of a white space that should be filled, which is an index which tracks a broader universe of technology companies. And by the way, tech companies, the definition has expanded quite significantly over the years. And so our Tech 100 actually also covers 18A and C, which other indices to date might not have. And the idea is that, we provide that, and hopefully that will give, or that will be a more representative, of what makes up our market, closer to the investor demand. And that's obviously the first step. The next thing that we should expect is obviously products, which will be offered on the back of these indices. And we're not going to stop with one. In fact, we also have, in the past few months, launched co-branded indices with other regional exchanges. So with Bursa Malaysia, we had now a co-branded large cap index, and it's constructed in a way where 60% are Hong Kong listed shares underlying, and the other 40% is Malaysian listed companies. And we will continue to stay close with the investors, and the idea is really to help them, or to provide them with the tools so that they can in turn come up with products or trading strategies.
You mentioned one of the things that people constantly talk about is your reliance on China, but you've been traveling. You mentioned you're in Central Asia, you talked about Malaysia. What's the strategy there? Why are you going out to, and you recently had a big conference here as well of, I think, ASEAN and Oceania exchanges. So what's the thinking there, and how does that improve the product?
Well, I was listening to the previous speaker, Ueda-san, and I think he puts it very well. Asia, the Asian region, is getting a lot more interesting, and in fact, accounts for 40% of the world's population or growth, and that there are so many opportunities that we as an international financial center should really position ourselves to capture. With Asia, I also feel that Hong Kong is now emerging as a very good capital raising platform for a lot of regional companies. Many companies are already listed in their home market, but they might have already outgrown their home market, right? So with the need to continuously raise funds, there is definitely a demand for tapping a deeper market, which Hong Kong is. And therefore, to me, it's always going to be two pools of participants that I look at and I focus on. On the one hand, issuers, on the other hand, investors.
Right.
And it should apply not only in Hong Kong, in the Chinese mainland, it should be regional and global.
Should we expect more Central Asian and Southeast Asian names to list on your platform? I mean, you can mention names if you want to, but...
Well, there was already one Central Asia company which came to list on our exchange last year. I do hope that there will be more, so watch the space.
Okay, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much.
Thank
We
you.
went through very, very quickly. Thank you guys so much. Bonnie Chan, a round of
Thank you.